Welcome to the Tambellini Group's Women in Technology Spotlight Series. In these interviews, we showcase the career paths, insights, and accomplishments from the remarkable women shaping higher ed technology. And today we are lucky enough to be joined by Jenn Stringer, who serves as the CIO at University of California, Berkeley. Welcome, Jenn.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, let's start off by talking about, if you can think back to your childhood before you ascended the ranks in technology and academia. What did you want to be when you grew up and why?
Well, I will say, as many children do, I had a succession of things that I wanted to be, including at one point, I thought I was going to be a midwife who attended home births. But right before I actually started on my current career path journey, I really thought that I was going to be a Lutheran minister like my father. And I was ready to go to seminary and become a Lutheran pastor, doing the same kind of social justice work that he did. And for a variety of reasons, I think very positive reasons, I decided that might not be the right choice at that particular time. And I ended up instead at Stanford University in their library system.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about your academic and career trajectory. Like, what did you major in? How did you get from there to here?
Yeah. Well, I was a history major. I went to UC Santa Cruz, go Slugs, while they still had no grades. So my academic transcript for my undergraduate education is about that thick. All full of written evaluations. So I think that might give you a sense of the kind of person that I am just in general, in terms of really valuing the work rather than necessarily sort of, the prize of a grade or that kind of thing. I ended up working at Stanford as a student. They paid a lot better than the UC system. And so I worked at Stanford for the summers in their library system for several years. And when I graduated, they offered me an interim position. It was a position running their media lab. And that was sort of history. I didn't think I was going to become a librarian. I was working at I sort of moved around and ended up at the engineering library. And the head librarian there said to me, you need to go to library school. Stanford will pay for it. They had a wonderful program that encouraged people to go back and get a master's degree in library and information science. And he said, you really need to go to library school. And I said, librarians are weird. I don't know that I really want to be one. Okay. And he laughed and he said to me, when I was all of 24, I think, you need to go to library school. You're going to run a library someday, and I'll probably be working for you. And I didn't end up running a library, and he never worked for me. But I think he saw something in me that I didn't even see, which was the ability to, manage people and manage, services and processes and get things done. And so I stayed in libraries for probably, 7 or 8 years, and then ended up moving over into academic technology.
And did you do an academic technology role at Stanford, or did you?
I did. I was poached out of the library by somebody who was running an R&D group right during the explosion of the internet. So yes, people, that's how old I am. Mosaic didn't exist when I got into this business. But she had a bunch of young developers, and they were actually working on what was a learning management system. They just didn't know it was a learning management system because that market sector didn't even exist. They were building something that they were calling the curriculum web portal. And she needed someone to manage these really brilliant young people who were creating, educational resources on the web. And so I moved over to do that. And the rest is sort of history, because they all went off to become millionaires during the dot-com boom. And I was stuck trying to figure out how to run this curriculum web portal. But I stayed in academic technology all the way through Stanford. And then I went to NYU. That was an intentional decision. So it was for people who are thinking about their own career journeys, I do think it's important. Some of this I fell into, and some of it I was very intentional about. So I was at the Stanford School of Medicine for many years. I actually was at Stanford for 23 years altogether.
Wow.
And I feel like that was just really kind of the start of my career, because at that point I realized I needed to understand if I wanted to grow and I wanted to add more value to the institution wherever I was going, I needed experience in a central IT organization, and I didn't have that. I was, at a school of medicine with lots of resources and really focused on the curriculum there and serving the dean there. And so I, at that point, really was looking for a job that would give me additional experience in a central IT organization. And so I ended up at NYU as the director of academic technologies there. And that was where I learned about ITIL and IT service management. And we were one of the first big installations of ServiceNow. And we moved to Google when I was there from our on-prem mail service. So really, that experience, while it was short, it was less than 3 years, was a tremendous experience for me in terms of understanding, serving truly what was a global university at the time, and still is. We were building a campus in Abu Dhabi. We were trying to figure out how to get networking there. It was a little before cloud services, so most people weren't trusting the cloud, and we were trying to figure out how to run things from our New York data center and provide services to Abu Dhabi and Shanghai. So it was really a crazy time, but I learned a lot, and I took all of that to me when I went to Berkeley, where I have been for the past 10 years, first as the Chief Academic Technology Officer, and then as Deputy CIO, and now as CIO.
It sounds like that NYU time was so formative and such an accelerant of your career in terms of all the things that you were doing there, and making that switch from more focused on the academic technologies to the overall technology aspect.
And it was very intentional. I know that, some people, particularly in larger R1 institutions, people tend to like to stay because they get really comfortable, and they might move around, from job to job. But they tend to keep people who are really dedicated to the mission and who love the institution. And I think that that's wonderful. But for me anyway, the ability to bring, 2 or 3 different institutional experiences to a role like the CIO at UC-Berkeley is invaluable. It teaches you, I call it navel gazing, when people look too internally to solve problems rather than externally, when you know that most problems probably have been solved by somebody else, probably maybe even better than you could solve them on your own. And so I think it does make sure that you're not sort of, navel gazing, and that you're looking to others to see how they've brought unique, challenging, addressed unique challenges at their own institutions. So
that's really cool. Now we've got this great job where you're doing so much, bringing together all those different types of experiences. What is a week in the life like for you in your current role? If there is a typical week.
Yeah, well, here's, what, honestly, money and politics.
Okay.
So I think, particularly at an R1 institution that's as large as Berkeley, I mean, we have over 50,000 students. We have, depending on how you count them now, our graduate students are actually employees, true employees of the university too. So we've got something like 18,000, 20,000 employees. We've got a police department. I mean, we really are like a city when you think about it in some ways. We've got housing, we provide, meal services, we've got research, we have our own power plant, for heaven's sakes. So at that point, when you're at an institution so large and you're providing services to such a wide variety of disciplines, as well as administrative needs, really you're a politician. You're trying to figure out what the deans want, you're trying to figure out what senior leadership wants, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to pay for it all. And certainly, especially in public higher education, particularly in California, it is a very difficult and challenging time after COVID. Budget cuts. And so a lot of it really is trying to figure out, what are the most important things that are going to help support the mission of the institution, and how do I, show leadership that these are things that are worthy of investment, and here's how they will help research and teaching and public service. And that really is, what my life is in terms of my work. On a day-to-day basis, it's a lot of meetings. And I think, one of my favorite parts of the job, honestly, is working with my own staff. So I'm very active in keeping open communications with my staff. I send out a weekly email to all of my staff, letting them know both what I've been doing, because I think sometimes people wonder, like, what the heck do those people do up there, in the CIO's office? What does she do anyway all day long? So I do that, and I also share with them what I'm reading and watching on television, just because I think I'm always looking for a good binge watch or a good novel. And so we have Slack channels on binge watching and music and pets. So really, trying to keep it real for staff. I also have a monthly in-person, what we call Java with Jenn, where people can come by and have coffee and treats. And then I do one virtually, because we have a lot of staff that are fully remote now. So a lot of it's just trying to stay connected to the people that I'm really there to, advocate for, and advocate for their work.
How many staff do you have?
I think our head count is about 350 now. And I will also say that as part of, I run the Berkeley IT organization, but we have something called One IT, which is the community of IT professionals across the campus, obviously, where you have distributed IT everywhere. And that's almost 1,000 people with IT titles on the Berkeley campus. And so we also have activities and both social events and training and that kind of thing for the entire One IT community. I have an open forum monthly where we invite all those people to visit us virtually, to understand what our strategic plan is looking like. So we strategically plan for IT across the campus, not just for the Berkeley IT organization.
So a lot of people and a lot of challenges, especially as you mentioned, dealing with, being in public education at this time with everything going on in budget cuts and economic uncertainty. Sounds really, really hard.
It's hard, but I will say, I think, and I really have found this true, every single job that I've ever had sort of has felt like it has the same stress level, and it's just as hard as the next job. And I think that's because, when you care about your work and you wake up every morning wanting to do a great job and really wanting to go to work, that stress that you put on yourself, or sort of the how you hold yourself accountable, is the same. And so even I remember back when I was managing what was circulation and stack, so library checkout and shelving books. That was one of, and I had a team of students and staff, and that was their job. I was waking up in the middle of the night worrying about those challenges, right? Do I have people for all of the shifts? Is the library going to stay open? Are we, collecting on, are people bringing their stuff back on time? All these silly, I mean, I when I look back on it now, but that kept me up at night. Just like now, I'm thinking about the security posture of the institution and how we're going to be able to fund our endpoint detection service that we need to get running so we can keep our cyber insurance.
Right.
But it's the same stress, right? It's the same challenges and the same, I think, drive to want to make sure that my organization is doing the very best that it can do for the institution.
It's an interesting perspective in terms of, when you bring that same drive and passion to work, you're always going to have that same sort of tension of,
Exactly.
am I doing everything in the right way to accomplish what we need for our community?
Exactly.
With that in mind, is there a particular project or accomplishment that you are especially proud of?
There are so many things from a technical perspective that I'm proud of, but really, I think the thing that I'm the most proud of is some of the culture work that we've been doing over the past 3 years and the diversity work that we've been doing. So when I became CIO, I was asked by the provost and the vice chancellor for administration to look at the organizational structure and think about how we could organize ourselves to do the best work that we could for the institution. And so as part of that, it was an 18-month process. It was highly collaborative. But one of the things that I really wanted to pay attention to was the staff. So we had 5 goals. 3 of them are going to sound very familiar: to be a trusted and strategic partner, to be an agile organization, and to be an efficient organization. So, I mean, none of that is atypical from any IT organization. But the last 2 were to make sure that we had an organization that focused on equity and inclusion and belonging and diversity, and that we had an organization that enabled staff to do their best work. And those 2 we've spent a lot of time on. So we have a people, performance, and culture group in my unit that didn't exist before. And that executive director of people, performance, and culture actually reports directly to me. Oftentimes, CIOs sort of bury that a level or 2 down, and they call it HR. And that is not what this is. This is really an organization whose focus is on making sure that our staff have the professional development that they need, that we are considering all of our choices from an equity, inclusion, belonging, and diversity lens. We have a program that I'm so excited, it's starting this summer, called Culture Champions, where we will be looking for volunteers from different parts of the organization to actually work with our DEIB lead. That's another position that we hired as part of my organizational restructuring, to actually become, champions of a positive working culture in their own, in their own positions. And this is sort of, this really is a train the trainer or teach people how to fish kind of activity. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm really excited that we are looking at how we create good hiring pools that are diverse enough so that we have, highly qualified candidates that bring a variety of experiences to the table. So that's what I'm really most proud of.
That's great. Let's move on now to looking into the future. I know you have the history background, and you certainly have contextual history from a lot of experience at different phases in academic technology and the evolution of technology in the cloud and everything. But when you're looking forward, what would you want to know and why? Let's say this omnipotent genie comes down that can answer any question for you about the future of higher ed technology. What would you want to know?
Oh, first I'd probably say, don't tell me.
Okay.
I mean, I honestly, I don't know that I would want to know, but If I had to ask a question, I actually would really say, what is the future of public higher education look like? I think that higher education has a lot, public particularly, because of the political aspect, right?
Yeah.
Public higher ed is being squeezed from both sides of the aisle. You look at what's happening in Florida. You look at people who are, taking over the academy and telling it what it can teach. And I think that's incredibly scary and harmful. You look at people's trust in higher education and whether or not they think that there is a value in a higher education degree. And that continues to go down. And then you look at places like California, where we've got tremendous challenges. Labor unions are Berkeley, the UC system just had the largest strike, I think, in history, where the UAW, the graduate students struck right during finals for weeks, withholding their labor to our students. Certainly to get better pay, which they deserve, but it's very challenging. I mean, those contracts will now add to the financial burden that we have as an institution. And I just think that higher ed is under attack from a variety of places. And I would ask that, Jeannie, what does it look like in 10 or 15 years? How have we met those challenges? And we will, because higher ed has been around for a heck of a long time, and we, struggle to change. And, these great institutions have withstood, so many challenges.
Right.
But I do think that these are different. And I would ask the Jeannie, how have we weathered the storm? What did we do to actually continue to bring the value to society that we need to bring, so that we can continue to be a democratic and civil society? But I don't have the answer of how we're going to do that yet.
Yes, I think a lot of people would like to have that answer. And
I think so
to your
too.
point, what you're saying in terms of having, this idea of what institutions have lasted for so long. I mean, if we look at, I've seen some lists where they compare like the Fortune 50 or the Fortune 100. Those fluctuate so much. There are some companies that were there maybe 20 years ago that aren't even around anymore, have been acquired, whereas higher education has had that staying power. So I hope that if the Jeannie were able to answer that question, they'd say, as you said, we're going to make it through it.
Yes, and selfishly, that Berkeley continues to be the #1 public institution in the country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you've certainly dealt with a lot of challenges. I mean, the CIO role has changed so much. We look at even over the past 10 years, and I know that your tenure in these various technology positions in academia has been even longer. And then you put on top of that, as you mentioned, getting squeezed from all sides and being a public institution. So what advice have you been given from a mentor, a leader, or anyone else in your life that has really helped you in these times where it can seem like it's really hard to get anything done?
I was thinking about this, and I think the most important piece of advice that I got was actually from a couple of different places, but it was the same piece of advice, which is keep your sense of humor. Particularly, when you're having to make challenging decisions, and honestly, when you're dealing with challenging people, keeping a sense of humor and recognizing that, this too shall pass, and taking a breath is, I think, one of the most important things that you can do in a leadership role. And honestly, try to wake up every day wanting to go to work and loving what you do. And I still do. So, you know, I still love the work that I do. I still wake up every morning wanting to come in and, you know, whether it's to the office or to sit in my chair at home,
Right.
working remotely. You know, I wake up wanting to be there. And I think that that's the most important thing is finding a way to continue to love your work and looking for the things that really give you joy.
It's very inspiring to hear that from you, because you've clearly taken it to heart. You know, even when you're talking about some of the challenges, I still see a smile there. You obviously still have the spark there. So thank you so much, Jenn, for taking the time today to share all this sage wisdom and all your insights from a wealth of experience.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to actually talk to you today. And it was something that brought me joy. So there you go.
There you go. Great note to end on.
Yeah.
All right.